And sometimes I'll see an adult say, don't spin, you're going to get dizzy. Or get down from that rock because you're going to get hurt. And then when we do that, the adults become the barrier to that neurological development that naturally happens when we allow plenty of movement up.
Hey everybody, welcome to Screen Less, Play More. I am Cynthia, the founder of ScreenLessPlayMore.com. And buckle up, everybody, because our conversation today is probably going to change the way you parent in the best way. I have the immense pleasure of speaking to Angela Hanscom, who is a pediatric occupational therapist and the founder of Timbernook, an award-winning nature-based program. And her book, Balanced and Barefoot, changed my life. It is one of the reasons I wanted to start this podcast in the first place. The subtitle is How Unrestricted Outdoor Play Makes for Strong, Confident, and Capable Children. So welcome, Angela.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
What sort of problems were you seeing with kids in your OT practice that led you to write the book and to start Timbernook?
So I just noticed that there was a lot of interesting sensory issues in children, and then there was a rise of that. So when I grew up in the early 1980s, occupational therapy was pretty rare. It was more reserved for children with more severe disabilities, and I just started noticing that like my own children had a lot of friends that were receiving services, and I was started to ask, what is going on here? I had one little boy come in that didn't like wind in his face. And I remember thinking, how do I treat that inside? Because usually we're found indoors. And so I was like, do I get a fan and blow the fan on the child? A lot of kids not wanting to get dirty. They didn't want to get glue on their fingers or to get messy.
Mm-hmm.
But the number one issue was that kids were starting to fall out of their chairs and onto the ground, starting to run into each other more frequently. And so, I just started paying attention to all those issues.
Those are big issues if you're falling out of your chair. Oh my goodness. And so part of what you did really was you started Timbernook, which is like an outdoor place where kind of all of those things can be dealt with, right? Because you have wind, you have dirt, you have all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And would you kind of say being outdoors is sort of a cure-all?
Yeah, I would. I don't know if it's a cure-all, but I would say that, it's a really a beautiful, like someone once described Timbernook as almost like a garden. Like it's like the perfect environment for children to grow and to be challenged in different aspects of development. And, it's got all the key elements out there. And so I do think that there's something going on in our environment. As you know, you're doing this podcast, we've changed things a lot. Kids are on screens for hours a day, and then they're being restricted in their ability to move and play in pretty profound ways. And all of that change is, I think, really affecting development in ways we never anticipated. And so Timbernook is providing that environment where they can really thrive. Yeah. So it's not direct therapy, but it's incredibly therapeutic.
Well, the most fascinating thing I think I learned from your book is that the movements that children do naturally are incredibly necessary to their development, like rolling down a hill, spinning in circles, jumping off of things, climbing. And like you say, a lot of times we're restricting that either by saying sit in your chair during kindergarten or don't jump up at that. That's too dangerous. But I'd love to start with spinning because, it's not like we tell them go and spin in circles. They just do that. Like you're just walking to the mall and they just start spinning. And what is it? Like what is that doing for them and doing for their bodies?
That's actually something that we use for treatment. We have an occupational therapists, again, we tend to work indoors, ironically, but we have swings in our clinics and we will purposely position children in different ways and spin them in circles. So they have a very good understanding of body awareness when navigating their environment. It's very similar to, we have an OT that created a board called the astronaut board, and it's a board that spins. And what we do is same thing. We position children all different ways and spin them. And the reason why she developed that is because she worked closely with NASA. And before astronauts go in outer space, they do the same thing. They get in a machine that moves them in all different directions. So when they go into the anti-gravity environment, they can really have a good understanding of where their body is when navigating. And so That's what we use with helping children have good body awareness and, again, being safe and capable in their environment. And so, yeah, sometimes kids will spin in circles. Like I remember doing that as a kid and doing it on purpose to get dizzy, see how dizzy I could get. And you'd fall and you get back up and you do it again. And that is incredibly therapeutic. Same with rolling down the hill, because that helps you to know, again, where your body is in space. It helps you to get on and off playground equipment effectively, and that sort of thing. And sometimes I'll see an adult say, "Don't spin, you're going to get dizzy,"
Mm-hmm.
or "Get down from that rock because you're going to get hurt." And this is probably what you were talking about, is then when we do that, the adults become the barrier to that neurological development that naturally happens when we allow plenty of movement opportunities.
And also what I thought was so interesting is like, I look at my kids and I think, oh my gosh, I would be so nauseous.
Yeah.
But why is it that kids really don't get that dizzy compared to us?
Yeah. Well, actually, yeah, every child is different. I think that, some children will like get pretty dizzy or feel really nauseous. And so it is key to allow them to do it on their own
Okay.
versus like taking a child, unless you're trained in it. But if you
Mm-hmm.
take a child and you spin them, you can make a child feel really sick. And the reason why a lot of adults can't tolerate that is because often we're not moving enough throughout the day. We're not climbing trees. We're not rolling
Mm-hmm.
down hills like we should. And so a lot of occupational therapists that work with older populations will keep really promoting movement, like aquatics and like different dance type programs, because we need to move and on a regular basis in order to basically inside our inner ears are little hair cells.
Mm-hmm.
And when we move in rapid ways, it moves that fluid back and forth, stimulates those hair cells, and develops what we call the vestibular sense. And that sense is like your balance sense, and it's key to all the other senses. So it helps with what we call sensory integration and lays a foundation for learning. It's a really, really important sense. And it is important that we move on a regular basis in order to not only just maintain it, but to strengthen it. It's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like the cardio system where like your heart and your lungs, in order to keep that strong, you have to do aerobics a couple times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to get really strong and buff, you have to do like lift weights a couple times a week
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that. The vestibular sense is the same thing. If you are not moving enough, like what we're doing with children, where we're overly restricting it, and with most adults, again, not moving enough, then what can happen is the fluid in the inner ear can thicken, and you can like have problems knowing, again, like balance issues, falling out of your chair in school type thing. And so it's a good reason why many adults can't tolerate rides when they're older. Like
Yeah.
we all of a sudden we can't do the spinny rides or the
Yeah.
roller coasters, is because we're not moving enough. So we will do instruction with adults to keep moving to avoid falling and hip
Yeah, I
fractures.
was going to say, so that sounds like if you're just sitting, if you retire and you just
Right.
decide to watch game shows all
Yeah.
day, no wonder people are falling if they
Yeah.
really are not using that sense.
Right. It can weaken. Yeah. But the first 7 years of life is critical for sensory development. And so it is really important that we keep kids, in babies, that we're giving them enough movement, because if you over restrict babies, they can get more ear infections and stuff and have a hard time knowing where their body is in space. So actually here's another fun fact, a baby, if they're full term, their vestibular sense is fully functioning. And so it's not like vision where they see in black and white and it takes time to develop. Because, if you think they're in the womb, they're being moved around, they're upside
Yeah.
down. However, if you take that baby and you set them upright and you put them in containers, so you put them in a stroller and then you put them in the car seat and you're not letting them crawl and move around, again, that is not being stimulated like it should. And so that can lead to issues with body awareness.
Wow, that's so interesting. Because it's true, kids just want to spin around, and we say, oh my gosh, you're going to get sick. Stop that. And also, like at school, I don't think my kids are allowed to go on their tummy on the swings or spin around on the swings. And you're saying, like, they should do it naturally, like doing somersaults or whatever. But I assume also a merry-go-round or some of those things would do the same thing for their vestibular sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So, two things. One is like, again, we're trying to get children into an like anti-gravity position. So we want them like in a clinic, I would want them on their bellies on the swing. I want
Okay.
them to go in different positions because again, that helps with being safer in their environment. And I think it's really interesting that in schools, we're saying, hey, don't spin on the swings, don't go on your belly, stay in this upright position.
Mm.
And that's actually working against creating safer children. Like they're trying to keep them safe, but now the kids don't have the actual developmental skills to be safe.
Yeah.
So the healthcare world does need to work with the school education to better educate everybody on the importance.
And how does it also play in with kids' ability to write and throw?
Yeah. So the other that vestibular sense that we talked about also supports all six eye muscles. So it's like a tripod for a camera. It stabilizes the eye muscles. So a child could go to the nurse's office and read, that Snellen eye chart,
Hmm.
just fine. But that just means they have good visual acuity. It doesn't necessarily mean that the eyes can work as a team. And so plenty of movement opportunities actually supports the eyes to be able to scan, which is really important for reading and for writing. So yeah, that's another.
So, I mean, it's just another example of like people think, oh, it's just playing, but it's really getting them ready for academic things. And
Mhm.
um, um, like one of the other things that kids love to do without being told is jumping off of things. And we're always like, that's too high up. What are you doing? Get off of that wall. But why do their bodies need that?
Yeah. Yeah, because they're really trying to seek challenge. They're trying to challenge themselves. And, that's important to get to the next developmental level is you're going to test things out. And if we don't allow them to, they're just going to get stuck. What's really interesting to me is, like we do a lot of field trips here. Actually, we have a field trip out in the woods right now. So I ran
Fun.
out here to do this with you guys. But, kids are being so overprotected that they're starting to lose the ability to assess risks properly.
Mhm.
So last year, I remember that these kids from this school uh, um, came, and kids were taking like unreasonable risks. Like I've never seen it before. We have huge boulders, and there was a child up on the rock that was going to jump off into a fort. And then there was multiple
Gosh.
children, not just one. And I'm like, whoa! Like so, to me, that tells me we've overprotected them for, and this was older kids like till fourth grade. So you overprotect them so much that now they don't know how to take safe risks, and they're going to do something that's going to cause harm to
Mhm.
themselves and others. So it is really important to start young, where as a toddler, as a baby, that that you fall and you get back up again. It's going to be okay, and then you modify your behavior. But we do need to allow them to take that proper risk taking um, really young.
Because you also, I suppose, learn, okay, that was just a little bit too high. I'm not going to
Yeah,
go that high this time.
right.
But then you get better and better and higher, and you understand what is actually risky versus what is just kind of a thrill and kind of fun. Whereas, yeah, jumping into a fort,
Yeah,
probably not a great
yeah.
idea. Another one that you had mentioned that I thought was interesting is like heavy work.
Mhm.
And if they're in nature, they're going to get this a lot. We don't necessarily have to set up an obstacle course or really plan this out a lot because they would just get this if they were playing outside. But what are some of the examples of heavy work and what does it do for their bodies?
Yeah, yeah. This is you'll hear occupational therapists talk about this a lot. Kids need a lot of heavy work. And if you look at outdoor play, like you said, they're naturally getting that. And some examples would be like climbing a tree, where you're getting nice resistance to the joints and muscles.
Mm,
Building a fort. Today I saw a lot of kids building forts and they're picking up heavy logs. All of that is giving nice resistance to joints and muscles. A kid was pulling a rope with a tire at the end of it. All of these things are getting nice
yeah.
heavy work. And what that does is it helps you to know where your limbs are in relation to each other. Body awareness again. And then also how much force to use when playing games like tag without hitting too hard. Now we're starting to ban tag because more and more kids are hitting with a lot of force and not necessarily meaning to, breaking their pencil over and over again with their lead, catching a frog and they're squeezing the poor frog. We see that Timbernook a lot where we have to go in and remind them. But,
Hmm.
if they were given plenty of, heavy work opportunities, that would be something that we would probably not see so much of. If kids are on screens all the time, if you think about it, if they're sitting for 9 hours a day, so the average amount of time kids are in the seat is 9 hours here in America. And so that's pretty sedentary lifestyle.
Yeah.
And then, you go home and a lot of these kids are on screens. And you're just not getting heavy work with that. You're pushing buttons. And so that sense will be affected.
And for example, like you're saying that schools say, okay, you're pushing each other too hard, so we're just going to ban that game. Or I remember my son was playing soccer and somebody got kicked in the shins by accident and they said, okay, you guys can't play this for the rest of the week. So what should they be doing instead?
Yeah. Yeah. So it really is a sensory thing. So usually, again, they don't mean to. It's like, so even if you point it out and say, don't hit so hard, they're probably going to do it again because that sense is off. And
Mm-hmm.
so they really do need more. It's a good indicator that they need more heavy work. Like that means that something's going on in the environment when that many kids are getting, quote, more aggressive. So
So it doesn't necessarily mean let's just keep playing tag, tag, tag. It means, okay, let's not ban the tag,
don't
but
ban the
let's give them, like, what would be an example of heavy work that they would do on the playground?
On the playground? Oh, man. Some like going on the monkey bars, gives you heavy work.
Because it's just like,
I
it's pulling on your joints
Yeah,
with gravity.
anything with heavy, like, unfortunately, like, a lot of playgrounds are fixed, so you can't pick things up.
Mm,
You can do a lot of hanging and stuff, so that will give you some, but some schools are starting to incorporate loose part play, where they can play with different materials that they can move around, like fort building, picking up heavy tires, all that stuff that would give nice resistance to joints and muscles.
okay.
Allowing tree climbing, things that we've kind of banned or we're afraid of. You can set limits with things. It's just important to allow opportunities, and as much yes as we can in those environments versus saying no to everything. And then again, then we're seeing all these behavioral issues.
So if we're a parent and we go to the park or the backyard, like, keep your mouth shut as much as possible unless you, like, really actually see something dangerous.
Yeah. So at Timbernook, our adults are trained to step back. We have a school psychologist out there right now. And so it was her first time at Timbernook and she's fascinated by what's happening. And so I went to her first because I'm like, she's never experienced Timbernook. And so I said, let's go sit over here. And it's usually further back than you think. And I'm like, we can still see them, but we're not going to get in their play. Because if we're too close, what happens is they start seeking constant adult reassurance. Like, is this okay? Or can you do this for me? Or there's more tattling going on. And so when you step back like 20 feet and you get down low, you can go in as needed and you go in quickly, but that helps the kids to start turning to each other, to come up
Okay.
with their own ideas and execute those play schemes. And then they start being much more capable.
Well, and what I also think is really interesting that I think really would have ramifications at recess is that you say it really takes kids quite a while to get into their play and deciding what game they want to do. How long does that typically happen when you're watching at Timbernook?
Yeah. So it depends on the kids. So if they've done Timbernook before, they dive into play a lot quicker. They have the experience. But a lot of
Hmm.
kids that are brand new, it can take 45 minutes or longer for them to figure out who am I going to play with? What am I going to play? And then dive into a
Hmm.
play scheme. So 20-minute recess sessions are frustrating for kids because it's like, I'm figuring out who am I going to play with? What am I going to play? And then the bell rings. So they
Hmm.
don't actually get into that really good deep play where all the good stuff is worked on, like social emotional skills, leadership skills, all the stuff that we want them to work on. And we
Hmm.
can't practice in the classroom is what they're working on during that time.
And there's like a bit of a curve, right? That like if they're out there for about 20 minutes and you bring them in, are they actually even more hyper than they were before?
Yeah, so that's another thing is if you're sitting from the majority of the day, you're probably your arousal level is probably up here. You're feeling fidgety, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you let them out, when you first start moving, your arousal level will go up. So in 20 minutes, now you're off the wall. And so a lot of teachers are having to dim the lights and do special exercises. But I would argue if you had a good 45 minutes to an hour, that's how long it takes for that to be able to your body to regulate and to be able to pay attention. So I often recommend at least an hour recess session so they can attend after.
So they can get out there, get really aroused, get into their play structure, and then they come to a point when they actually are more calm than they were when they went outside.
Yep. And I would say the other thing to keep in mind that I don't talk about this often is, again, it depends on how often they get that kind of experience. So like here, this group came out for a field trip and their arousal level was up here 2 hours in still. Like it's
Wow.
because they are so, it's almost like they're play deprived.
Hmm.
And so there's this sense of urgency. But if they kept coming, so we have year-round programming, we notice a big difference. Those kids are used to it. There's no rush and they have plenty of time. And you see a lot more regulated play and more advanced play when they have more opportunities to do this. So keeping in mind that time is really important. Yeah.
So if you had a magic wand
Yeah.
and you could organize the school day at a typical public school, how would you do it in terms of like how often would they have recess? How long would the recesses be? How much like movement would you see in the classroom if they're not going to be like a forest school or something, but we're trying to improve on the
Yeah.
traditional mode?
Yeah. So we have 10 certified Timbernook schools. And one particular school is really a great model for the other ones. And what they do, they're very academic oriented. And it's not a public school.
Okay.
But I do think public schools need to rethink how they're doing things.
Hmm.
This is called Laconia Christian Academy. So people can look them up, and there's also a video where the teachers and their head of principal are talking about Timbernook and how it's affecting the culture in their school. And we just got back research from the University of New Hampshire on the changes in the kids because of this. But what they did was they started with Timbernook once a week for 2 hour time block in the woods. And then the second year, they've been doing this for 6 years now. The second year, they went to twice a week Timbernook. They have 5 hours of Timbernook every week. And they won't sacrifice Timbernook. If they have a field trip, that's on top of that.
Okay.
Then they took their recess and they went from half an hour to a full hour every single day. So they have 10 hours
Wow.
of playtime, and they saw no change in their like data, like their academics. If anything, it went up. And this is during COVID, and
Wow.
it went up. And these kids are more resilient. They're taking one interesting feedback from the research was they were taking risks out in the woods, and they started to take more academic risks when they got back into the classroom. So I thought that was really interesting, but much more resilient, much more independent, able to solve their own problems. You know, they would work out their social issues out there, emotional issues, and then like again, more regulation and attention in the classroom. And
So
they're happy.
every day, yeah, I would be
Yeah.
really happy if I got to do that.
Yeah, right.
Every day they've got an hour of recess, and then twice a week on top of that hour, they get to go in the woods and do free play for 2 hours. So some days they get 3 hours of outside play. And do they stack those so that it's three in a row, or is it 1 hour and then 2 hours another
Yeah.
time?
Um, I'm not sure. I think it might be after recess for some of I think it depends on the grades.
And this is elementary.
This is up to, yeah, 6. So middle school has a different program as like an outdoor leadership program, but it's pre-K through 5th grade has it. Yeah.
So if you had your druthers, you're saying it'd be better to have, are you saying that it would be better to have 1 hour long recess instead of 2 half-hour ones?
Yes, because play is where they learn, and play is where that's where it's therapeutic. And so we are getting to the point where teachers are, and like leadership in schools are saying we are desperate because the behavioral issues are through the roof, and things that worked in the past are not working anymore. And so if we don't, we need to do something different. And so, yes, I would definitely recommend a full hour recess and more time for this kind of
Because it's
program.
not just
Yeah.
like, oh, they need some fresh air, like, oh, they need to stretch
Yeah.
their legs. It's like, no, they need
Right.
to really play and get
Yes.
into a scheme and move their bodies and lift
Right.
things.
Yeah.
And okay, well, that's, I mean, I hope some principals are listening. I hope some parents tell the schools that they've heard this,
Yeah.
because it sounds like that would work, that if they can come back in and be a little more calm and a little, I'm sure they probably pay a lot better attention after that hour, to whatever the teacher is saying.
Absolutely.
So if there's like a listener today who has kids that are not used to playing outside and they've just decided, okay, I am going to try, I'm going to make it a change today, and I'm going to have my kids go to the park or have them go in the backyard. What do you think they should say when their kid comes up to them after 5 minutes? I'm bored. How should people deal with that when kids are just really not used to doing this?
It just takes time. Like it's funny because we have our providers that are out there are all trained to say certain phrases. And it's basically just putting it back on the child. Like,
Okay.
I wonder what you can do. So you're not doing it for them, and we never give ideas like, "Oh, you could do
Okay.
this," because then they start seeking adult reassurance and help again, and they learn, "Oh, well, I'm not capable of coming up with my own ideas." So it does take time, and it does take practice. And the reason why is, if here's a great example: if I say, "Okay, go outside," like a child goes out and they come back in, they say, "There's nothing to do out there. I see rocks, I see sticks, and I see leaves." Now you send that same child back out and they pick up a stick and they start digging with that stick and they realize, "Oh, I have one visual affordancy. I can dig with the stick." And then let's say they start writing with it and they're like, "Oh, I can write. It can also be a tool to write with." Now let's say they see another child. This is where other children are part of the environment and inspiration for play. Another child building with sticks. And they realize, "Oh, I can also build forts with sticks." So the more exposure they get to that material, and have the time to experiment with it, the more play affordances they're going to get. Also seeing other children use those materials in different ways. That's how they get more creative and independent with their play.
So just whatever you can say to be like, I'm sure you'll come up with something, or like, what are some of the key phrases you teach them to say?
Yeah, sometimes we say nothing and we're like, "Hmm." Or if they wanna tell us like, "Oh, I did this," and it's usually like a thumbs up. Like, we try to be boring,
Okay.
and then we also, again, other children are key. So if you can invite children over for the day or encourage them to play with other children, that's really, it makes it so much easier because they will inspire those kids to play in ways that they didn't think of.
Hmm.
So, and then giving them materials, like some novel materials that they can play with outside that are not toys. It might be stuff to build forts with. It might be like old curtains, old kitchenware stuff. Placing that out will often inspire new ideas. They need some sort of bridge. And then you might have to be out there in the beginning and just be busy so that you're not, like raking or something. So they're relying on you, but they're comfortable. You're outside too, and then you can phase yourself out over time. But sometimes you do have to go out in the beginning.
I think that's interesting to not give ideas, because then they get used to coming to you for the ideas
Oh yeah.
and they just need to make it up themselves. Yeah, I
Hmm.
like that. And I like that you say that we need to be boring.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned in your book that I'm sure probably has a lot to do with this world of constantly watching screens is that myopia, known as nearsightedness, is on the rise. And kids are having trouble using their eye muscles in unison to scan a room or read a book. Where is this coming from? I mean, is it the screens? And what what does playing in nature do to solve this?
Yeah. Well, so we talked about part of that already with like, again, that plenty of movement opportunity supports the eye muscles
Mhm.
component. Um, I am definitely not an expert in screens. However, I know that it's super addicting and it is replacing a lot of good old fashioned playtime. And so that to me is my biggest Yeah, like, it just
Yeah, that it's just like a barrier to doing other things.
and the other thing that I've paid attention to over the years is, when we do therapeutic tools or movements or whatever, in our OT books, often it says, like, they're not supposed to be on screens when we're doing that. So if they're listening to therapeutic music, which is like special music that helps with attention
Mhm.
and body awareness, all that stuff, they're not allowed to look at a screen because that will actually counteract the therapeutic effects.
Mm.
So I was like, that's very interesting that screen time can actually work against what we're
Mhm.
doing
Yeah.
therapeutically with children.
And so being outside also, I suppose they're looking in the distance far more
Yeah, that
often.
too. Yep,
They're,
absolutely.
they're getting sunshine. Like, how does sun play into it?
I mean, there's vitamin D and the depth perception outdoors. You can see a lot further than when you're inside. There's only so far you can see.
Yeah.
When you step outdoors, like multiple synapses are firing in the brain. So your chance for that sensory integration, that organization in the brain is going to be higher when you step outside because you have the wind, you have all different things happening.
Mhm.
You have different temperature changes. It could be raining on you. It could
Mhm.
be snowing. You know, the ground is uneven, so it's going to challenge you more where inside it's all flat. You don't have to think about it much and
Mhm.
everything's simpler. Outdoors it's going to really put you in a position where it's nice and calm, but you're alert while you're out there. And that is the ideal state for that sensory integration, is going to be in a calm but alert state of mind.
Okay. It's not the same to have a sensory bin as to just
No.
be digging in the dirt or to be,
Yeah.
you're smelling different things, you're hearing
Mhm.
different things.
Yeah. And a sensory pen is actually a good example. We do that in the clinic. We'll bring a little box of sand inside and we call that sensory. But when I do presentations, I will put an image up of kids in giant mud puddles looking for frogs and comparing that to a kid playing with a little box of sand. And I'll say they're both sensory.
Mhm.
If our true objective is to create change to the senses, which one do you think is going to do that? And so then everyone always says the mud puddles. So, and I ask them, what is happening here that you're not getting over here with the sensory bin? And first of all, it's a whole body sensory experience, right? Head to toe muddy. There's more space, more children. So you're going to get community connection, in person connection with other children.
Yeah.
There's endless play ideas. And again, you're restricted again, aren't you, with the
Yeah.
sensory bin? There's only so much space. You're going to have to regulate mess. Adults going
Exactly.
to have
You're
to.
constantly saying, "Oh, don't get that out of the bin. I'm gonna have to vacuum that up."
Yes. So the adult's going to have to go in more. And, you can't reduce that adult presence and get that more advanced play. The other thing is it's shallow. So a lot of kids don't want to get messy nowadays. And when you touch the sensory bin, you're just igniting that light touch sense that can feel aversive for a lot of kids. And the way to override that is heavy work, that deep pressure. You hear OTs talk about brushing programs where it's
Mhm.
this deep pressure. And if you are playing on a beach or playing with the giant mud puddles, when you are digging in the dirt, you're getting that light touch sense, but you're also getting deep pressure. And that helps to integrate that light touch sense and create change to the senses so that you can start tolerating different textures. So outdoor play, I'm going to go to that every time because it
Yeah.
is going to create change to the senses in a way that you can't.
Anecdotally, I find it really interesting because one of my sons has autism and he hates slimy things. Like if they make slime at school
It's
or
not
if they're
natural.
doing shaving cream or something. However, if he's outside playing, he's happy to play in mud,
Yes.
sand. Like it kind of boggles my mind that something outside could be very slimy and it's like it doesn't even occur to him. And I don't know if it's just because it's so much more fun or there's so many other things going on that it keeps him from focusing on the texture or something.
Yes. So there's a couple things happening with that because sometimes if you have this, like, we're going to play with slime or shaving
Mhm.
cream, and there's an adult right there, I'm not sure what the environment is like, but there's this preconceived we're doing this right now.
Mhm.
And when kids have sensory issues, there's often anxiety in there. And so just that alone can increase anxiety. Out in giant mud puddles, it's a choice. Like, you
Mhm.
might just watch other kids. You can regulate what you're ready for when you want to, and it's a real environment. So if you start going barefoot out there, you're probably more likely to go barefoot camping, in other environments. And in the indoor space with the slime, it's not in the real world. And so
Yeah.
just because you play
Yeah.
with oobleck doesn't mean you're all of a sudden going to go barefoot outside.
Yeah.
It is multiple things. Yeah.
And I used to be such a stickler, especially when my kids were really, really little, about going barefoot and, oh,
Mhm.
we're going outside, put on your shoes.
Yeah.
Obviously, if it's 95 degrees and you're on asphalt, you need some shoes. But what are the benefits of going barefoot? And like, should we try to as much as we can? Or,
Yeah. So it's, going barefoot is obviously, it's really good for kids. I actually worked with, very briefly, I wrote a couple blog articles for a company that does barefoot shoes.
cool.
And what's really cool is that you can feel the ground push up on different parts of your feet as you walk. And they showed me images of what our feet should look like when we're barefoot or wearing shoes that are barefoot all the time versus those that kids are wearing regular shoes.
Hmm.
And the feet should really spread out. And they looked at and researched the difference. And they found those that wore barefoot shoes had more muscle mass, stronger muscles in the feet and the ankles than those that were wearing the restricted shoes. And the arches were too high in the people that wear shoes. So if you watch kids, it's working on every aspect of their development, and they can feel the ground. It's giving more feedback to where their body is in space as well as they're navigating their environment. It's probably safer than wearing shoes, to be honest.
So the barefoot shoes they would give you protection from like the heat or the snow or something, but they just give you the movement that you need.
Yeah, it's very flexible. Yeah.
Okay.
You can feel the earth under your feet. It's really interesting.
So that's what you would suggest if we have to be wearing shoes?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they're a little
Interesting.
more expensive, yeah, but
Gonna have to check those
that's
out
why
because yeah, it's true that a lot. Little kid shoes like they really are kind of just like a tomb. They're like encased in this rubber,
Yeah,
not
well,
moving
that's
much.
why, like, toddlers, it's really important for them to have those flexible shoes because they're just developing those arches and stuff.
Hmm. Well, I'm guessing maybe you grew up doing a lot of outside play, perhaps. But one thing I love to ask as my final question of people is to think back to a time that they were allowed to go play on their own without adult supervision, because part of this movement towards getting kids away from screens, we also need to give them more independence and more freedom and be able to do things on their own. So what is a time, if you're willing to share, when you were either like a kid or a teenager that you remember, my goodness, I'm allowed to do this and there's no teachers and there's no parents and I'm doing my own thing?
Yeah. So I guess my example was more like a daily thing. And it was, I had a friend that lived behind me. We lived in a neighborhood, and it was like a circular type of deal where she lived behind me and we had a fence that we could open the door to get to each other's
Oh,
house.
cool.
Yeah, so we would play because I was the only child, and her brother was really a lot older than her, so she was almost like an only child. So we had each other, and then we would go off and take our bikes, and we would go and we lived in Vermont, so we would return cans because you could get money if you return cans. And so we would, get money to buy candy, and then we would go to garage sales and we would purchase items like old
Fun.
curtains and different like kitchenware stuff. And we would go to the park on our own and have our own picnics and bring food, and we would place it on the
Fun.
plates that we buy and stuff.
How
So that's
old do you think you were?
we were probably like, I would say 8 and 9.
Wow. It's like kind of self-sufficient. It's like you're making your own money, you're buying your own stuff, you're figuring out your own play.
Yep. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that sounds really fun. How can people find out more information about Timbernook and just a basic of what it is? And also, people can actually open their own Timbernooks, right?
Yeah, so you could just go to the Timbernook website and you can find out more information about where it is. So if you are a parent and want to have Timbernook, and you can look to see if there's one in your area. Same with schools, they can look to see for field trip opportunities just to get exposed to it and the concepts. And then yeah, we do train people to bring Timbernook to their location. And we also train schools to do it if they have an area to do an outdoor classroom.
Very, very cool. Well, and
Mhm.
also I highly recommend that everybody check out your book, Balanced and Barefoot. It just goes into all these things we've been talking about of what kids are supposed to do with their bodies
Right.
naturally and how we're keeping them from doing it and how it's just basically really, really easy to just let them do what their bodies are telling them to do. And the best way to do that probably is just outdoor play.
Yeah. Thank you for having
Thanks for listening. If you're a fan of what you heard, make sure to follow or subscribe on whatever platform you use to listen. Also, if you'd like a deeper dive on screens, play, kids, and parenting, please check out my Substack, also called Screen Less, Play More. Thank you again. I really appreciate it. And I'd like to thank Neil Penninger, who composed our theme music.